Welcome to the SRS Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron J. Babyar, and I'm the Training Director of Support Raising Solutions. Whether you're a new ministry worker or a veteran looking to increase your competence and confidence, Support Raising Solutions seeks to bless you in your quest to be a spiritually healthy, vision-driven, fully funded Great Commission worker. My guest today, once again, is Mark Stephens. Mark was a guest on the SRS podcast for the first time on the episode 115 that released back on September 6th. And, at that time, Mark shared with us about having an end-of-year plan for ministry partner development. Hopefully you had a chance to listen to that. If you didn't, it's not too late. Go find that. Go listen to that. But we know that some people are in different places with thinking about the end of year. And so I invited Mark back once again to touch on this topic, as by the time this is publishing, it's getting to be late October, early November, and people need to hear it. So first of all, Mark, my friend, welcome back to the SRS podcast. It's great to have you again.
Hey, Aaron, it's great to be here. I was honored to be on the first time, my first podcast ever, and now I'm here a second time. So it's great to be with you, my friend.
Yeah. Now, remind our listeners, for those that might have missed out or didn't capture some stuff about you the first time around, you work with FCA, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and I believe you're out of Maryland. Tell us a few more things about yourself to allow us to get to know you, not just the dude who knows some things about support raising.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I'm getting ready to celebrate my 30th wedding anniversary. So that's been an exciting time for us this fall. And I have 4 daughters. I used to be a wrestling coach for 20 years. So God has a sense of humor to give a wrestling coach 4 daughters.
Yes.
None of which are wrestlers. So I've learned to coach girls lacrosse, which is pretty popular here in Maryland. And I am the Mid-Atlantic International Coordinator. And so I coordinate all things international out of the 5 states in the Mid-Atlantic region. And we're aligned with Southeast Asia, 11 countries over there. So I work a lot with those leaders over there, helping them raise funds too, not only here in the U.S., but helping those guys in some very tough countries raise funds. So
Sweet.
Yeah. I like to say, I use a quote. I think you guys use it too. You forget where you get these quotes sometimes, but salvation is free, but ministry cost. Somebody gave credit to Billy Graham for that. So we got to have some funds to make some of this ministry happen.
Yeah. Well, very cool. That's right. I forgot you were a wrestling coach. I grew up in Iowa, which is like wrestling ground zero, I think. So I was the rare kid that tried it and just went, you know what? I think I like basketball. So I was more of a basketball player, but I definitely grew up in the shadow of Dan Gable. He coached at the university not too far down the road from me where I grew up. So University of Iowa, but
absolutely.
Anyway, well, hey, let's dig into this topic a little bit today. I know that we have probably a few different types of people that are listening to the podcast. So first of all, we're assuming that everybody listening has raised or is raising support. And then also we're assuming that you are aware of that, at least in the U.S., I'm sure this is true in other places, but at least in the U.S., a large portion of people give funds towards the end of the year. And a lot of people will make those decisions really as soon as early November in many cases, if not October. And yet, Mark, I think it was you who was just reminding me of this earlier. In the last 4 days of December is when as much as 30%, maybe in some cases more, 30% of a lot of charitable giving happens in the last 4 days of the calendar year, although a lot of times those decisions are made earlier. Those decisions are made in October or November. So that's why we're coming together to really record another episode on this topic, because it can be a really key time to let supporters know about some dreams, some vision dreams that your ministry is having that's going to need some financial backing, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. They say, not to get the numbers confused here, but 20, 30, 40% of all nonprofits are given. All nonprofits raise 30 to 40% of their funds in the last 2 months. And out of that 30 to 40%, 30% of that comes in the last few days
Wow.
of December. So, yes, decisions are made earlier. So, the earlier we can start, the better. But a lot of it doesn't happen till the end. And some people do decide in the last few days. So, it's important to get an advanced start. And that's kind of where what we're talking about. What happened if you didn't get started early? Then what, you know?
Right, right. And by the way, just to, as we reset this too, I realize that sometimes people you can be a little bit confused by all this. And so, what is commonly said in the SRS boot camps is that your bread and butter, your daily needs, your bi-weekly, bi-monthly, your regular paycheck, whatever that is, that likely in most cases, that actually needs to be based off regular, good old-fashioned monthly consistent support. That's generally true, though not in all cases. Mark, I'm not sure about you and FCA, but I have found in my conversations with a lot of global missions workers that it's pretty common for people to find around 80% of their regular income does come from monthly support. But then that leaves about 20% that comes irregularly or comes as special gifts
Mhm.
or comes at the end of the year. Those are statistics that I have noted and noticed, and that's been true in my personal support as well. What have you noticed a similar trend within yourself or within FCA?
Yeah, absolutely. I would echo the same thing. There, your bread and butter has to be your monthly supporters that are ongoing. That gives you an incredible peace of mind, gives your spouse a peace of mind, gives your organization a peace of mind, and the people that you're working with. They know that you're going to be there because you have that solid monthly funding. There's nothing like that. That is the most important part. I believe that year end funding can sometimes put us over the top. Or in FCA, we have something called the red zone, means you're not going to get paid this month. Yellow zone means you're doing okay. Green zone means you're doing good. But it can put what I call you in the super green zone, like you're super financially healthy. And when you have opportunities to do ministry and new opportunities come along, you're like, I don't have the money. But if you have a great year end, you're setting yourself up for that year to step into those opportunities that you didn't even plan for, but God had a plan for them, and He supplied those needs in November and December.
Right, right. Yeah, very cool, very cool. So, hey, listener, you might not fall perfectly. Yeah, you really might not fall perfectly. But Mark and I talked just briefly before we even pushed record on this conversation, and we said, there's probably a few different type of people listening that are support raising. So, there's probably those who are like, you are somewhat on track. You listened to episode 115 that came out that published September 6th. You listened to that or soon thereafter, and you've done some things, and you're feeling pretty good about it. So we think that's probably some of the audience. And there's probably some people that you really thought about doing something at the end of the year, but you haven't done very much. Like you might have done one or two things. Maybe you did some family photos, or maybe you ordered some cards, or you thought about a gift to give, but you haven't actually really done much with that. And then we have a few people that you've done nothing. Like this whole idea of asking for special gifts at the end of the year, you're aware that happens, but you haven't actually done anything about it. Or maybe you've had an idea or two and you're not so sure if they're that great of an idea. So you just realize you got to get going. So Mark, I know that's a few different audiences there, but first of all, let's just affirm something when it comes to a story of a changed life or a compelling story. There is an important piece when you're asking for an end of year gift. There's an important piece that comes back to a narrative that needs to be communicated. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, one of the key things, if you say I haven't done anything, right? If you say if I'm in the category I have not done anything, I would suggest number one is start to write down a plan and create a checklist. If you did start and you created that plan, one of the early things you want to do is have this compelling story. What is a compelling, heart touching story that really exemplifies what you're trying to accomplish in your ministry. So for me, I'm talking to my guys in Southeast Asia to say, tell me a story of somebody coming to know Christ. And so I've been working with them and I have a very compelling story this year from our staff in Vietnam. It's a great story that I'm excited to tell others, and I've got a great image of the guy, and I've got permission to share that internally. I won't be putting that on the web or anything like that, but I have the permission to share that just with my people and email do not forward kind of deal. But you got to have that compelling story, and you might know of it right away. You might be like, "Wow, this happened here." This is the compelling life changing story. You got to have that story, and you got to be excited about it. Like I'm excited about my story, and you got to be able to share that you got to be able to share that in 2 or 3 4 sentences.
Mm.
And when you send out your letter or your email here at the end of the year, that people read that and say, wow, they are really changing lives,
Mm-hmm.
accomplishing their mission.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to give them a boost and support them here at the end of the year.
Yeah. And by the way, it's great to share a few statistics. Like that's fine. In fact, if you have some good ones that help to underline, that's great. But I've been guilty of saying this more than once. I probably stole it from someone at some point, or I might have actually thought of this one, but I'm not going to take the credit because I'm not sure of that. But your statistics are your skeleton, your story, your narrative of a changed life. That's flesh on the bones.
Mhm.
That's what actually makes you go, oh wow, there's proof of concept there. Mark is not just a great guy that works for FCA, but he is working with people and seeing life change. And here is a story of somebody whose life was changed because of his work with FCA. Okay, now it makes sense. That's very different than, hey, FCA, we have some great Bibles and we handed them out, which I know you guys do, which is a wonderful thing. But
Sure, sure.
but you do so much more than just hand out Bibles. Having that narrative of someone whose life was changed, now that's what helps a potential supporter, a potential special gift giver at the end of the year go, all right, this is worth it. This is a good investment. Let's take a few seconds to mention an important resource that can be helpful for support raisers. CMM Press has published another great book that is not only for those who raise their personal support, but also they oversee teams or even an organization whose staff teams raises their own personal support. Scott Morton is a champion for biblically based ministry partnership development, so I highly recommend that you pick up a copy of his book called Blind Spots. It's available at cmmpress.org, where you can receive a 10% discount if you use the code SRS Podcast. Great, Mark. I appreciate you kind of talking a little bit more about that. Let's talk a little bit more though, to just kind of redo this a little bit. Let's talk to the people that they don't even have a plan. Like they need to create some sort of plan. They're late in the game, or maybe they started a plan and they're realizing, okay, my plan's not so great. I need to rework it. What do they do here at the end of October, the beginning of November, as we're getting towards the end of the year? What does that look like as far as coming up with a good plan?
Yeah, I think part of the reason we don't have people haven't created a plan. Some maybe have never done this, so they don't know what to do. So they need to connect with an organization like Support Raising Solutions. I know FCA, we provide a plan for people. Even that, I kind of tweak that a little bit. But I think for most people in ministry, it's a matter of pulling out and stop being in the ministry, in the front lines of doing what you're doing and working on the ministry. So
Mm.
pull yourself from in the ministry to the back lines to working on the ministry and take a half day, take a few hours and create a plan. Why? Because this is going to be very, very impactful for you when you get to 2021, that you're going to go in strong financially, that you're going to go in ready for new opportunities. So I would say, as far as a plan, pull yourself back and figure out what is most helpful to you. Now, here's a couple key items. Number one is you got to have a goal. Your goal is going to drive you. When there's that scoreboard, we play differently. And if you get out and you're just kind of shooting the basketball around like you did in Iowa, Aaron,
Mm-hmm.
it's one thing, and you're just kind of shooting around and there's not much intensity. But as soon as you put the scoreboard up and say we're going to play horse or we're going to play to 15 or whatever it is, everybody plays the game differently.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to have that goal in front of you that's written. I would even put it up on in a poster board, or if you have a whiteboard, write it on there. This is your goal. That's very, very visual that you want to reach. So have the compelling story. We already talked about that. Have a goal. And then what are the steps you're going to do, you're going to take to do two things. Number one is thank your donors. It's a huge part of this year-end time of getting on the phone, of meeting face to face. That might be Zoom these days, and sending something that says we appreciate you. We want to thank you, and then executing that plan of staying in touch with people and casting the vision through your social media when you can. I send an old school letter and hand address every envelope. That's the only time I send it, and so it kind of pops a little bit because it's old school and the envelope is hand addressed, and then I send an email out to everybody through Constant Contact, and I can see how many opens I'm getting and resend it then. And then getting on the phone, we call every single person who gave us $1 or more in the last 2 years. So you got to know that information. So go to however somebody tracks that, go to that and follow that up. And it's not too late. I just want to encourage you, don't say, hey, I'm going to wait till next year. I would say start small, think big, do everything you possibly can this year, learn from your mistakes, and then you're going to be much better when you get to the end of the year 2021 because you did what you could here at the end of 2020.
Right. Now, I will say this real quick because I get this question, variations of it every year. Well, these people just joined my team. Am I not going to the well too often? Or they just gave me a special gift. Like, wouldn't it be like discourteous of me? Hey, people, we want to just remind you, first of all, one of the most important things about raising support is being spiritually healthy. In fact, it's the most important thing. If the Holy Spirit is telling you, if God is telling you, hey, maybe don't ask this person right away again, that's fine. Go with that, please, every single time. However, too often we run into people that they're letting fear drive whether or not they're moving forward and making that ask. And so listen to the Holy Spirit first and foremost. Also, though, this is different. Asking for monthly support is different from a special gift. So if I have somebody who's on my team who's given $100, $150 a month every single month, I'm still going to send them that end of year giving like newsletter or message or whatever else. And I might even call them and say, hey, I really appreciate your monthly support and your prayer. Here we are as we're closing on the end of the year. Could I tell you about kind of a special need that's coming up here at the end of the calendar year that might be something that you might want to know about kind of over and above? And, asking people that question can really, really help people go, oh, yeah, or no. Well, I mean, you can tell me, they could say, you could tell me, but we're probably not going to do anything extra. Or other times I've had people go, oh, yes, please tell me. And so they're giving their normal $100, $150 a month, but I let them know about something special come up and they do something different at the end of the year. So this is why, Mark, I just want to definitely applaud everything you just said and just agree with you and say, hey, people, you need to have some sort of plan and some sort of goal. Now, I do want to talk briefly about goals, Mark. I know sometimes people have a financial goal. That's not always the best goal in and of itself, though, when it comes to end of year, is it?
No, I think that's a part of it, right? But there's a goal to make sure you're in touch with all of your people, and then there's a goal. I really think we have a goal of thanking people and really blessing people, and I think those are all coming together here at the year end.
Right. Also, from a work standpoint, I just want to encourage people from like, what do I do and all that kind of stuff. Hey, you can't affect what people are going to give or not going to give, but you can affect how many people you invite. You can affect how many personal conversations you have. And so I might need to raise, I'm just going to randomly pick a number here. Let's say I need to raise $5,000 US at the end of the year. Well, that'd be great if I get that. I might want to ask, and I might want to let people know of that as a goal, but I can't necessarily affect how much money is coming in, but I can affect, have I asked 50 different people? Have I invited 50 different people to give $500 to $1,000 here at the end of the year, or whatever God leads them to do? That's something that I can affect. And so Mark, one of the things that's kind of like a pet peeve of mine is when we have goals that aren't attainable, they're not smart, they're not specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time conscious. So it's not realistic to go, I want $500,000 at the end of the year, and I only plan to call 2 people. Well, that's just, that's not very smart. Yeah. That's not a very smart goal. And so let's make sure, people, as you're setting your goals, set goals that are measurable, that you actually have some degree of control over. You can affect whether or not you have 50 different conversations over a couple of weeks. You can't actually affect how people respond. So is being spiritually healthy is the most important thing, but also as we're setting those goals, let's be realistic. Let's have things that are completely dependent upon God, but also where we have a role to play in meeting some achievable goals.
Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things, Aaron, not to tee myself up for a third podcast, but I think that when I was getting ready to raise funds, I met with this business guy who did a lot of international work, and he took his business from 10 million a year to 110 million a year over a very short period of time. And I said, how did you do that? I want to meet with you. And he said, I applied the 4 disciplines of execution. It's a book. And so that's something that I've applied, and it kind of brings the SMART goals and everything together, but it's really simple, and it applies that. And if you could go out there on YouTube and watch the video, 4 disciplines of execution. But it's something I'm passionate about. I think it's something that would help you. And then the second thing along these lines, the same thing we encourage you to do with your monthly givers. After somebody's been given 18 months, 24 months, encourage them to give a little bit more, right? Because their salary has increased and things have increased for them. Encourage them to bump up a little bit on their monthly support. And the last few years, I've tried to be more strategic at the end of the year. So, whether the person gives me $100 or $1,000 at the end of the year, if I'm organized, I can go back and say, hey, and I've texted people, hey, you've given $100 last 5 years in a row. I'm super grateful. So thankful. Would you prayerfully consider bumping to $200? Or you've given $1,000 at the end of the year. Would you prayerfully consider bumping up to $1,500? It's amazing how just giving a little bit, everybody bumping just a little bit, how it ends up with this great total. And that's been a great strategy for me too at the end of the year.
Yeah, and that really does add up. Now, you said you can text them, and I'm not disagreeing with you, but I have a little bit of a spidey sense a little bit anytime I'm texting about money. And so people, I would advise you can text those that God's leading you to text more often. Things will probably go well if you call someone and invite them to do that. They will remember that. They're less likely to forget that text. They're more likely to really consider it. So Mark's not wrong. But also, sometimes the quickest way isn't necessarily the best way. So again, as you're considering what you might do at the end of the year, there might be some people they give every year, but you would need to reach out to them personally and thank them and remind them and ask them to do something a little bit different. And also, Mark, and we would not get into all this, but I have a couple different times I've done this where at the end of the year, I put more of my efforts into trying to have 5 or 10 appointments, actual sit-down appointments with people that are on my monthly support team, and ask them something along the lines of, hey, thank you. Here's a story we changed life. As we look into next year, you've been giving $75 a month. I want to thank you. I want to invite you as we go, in January, to bump that up to $100 or even $125 a month. That'd be going up $25 to $50 a month. Is that something that you think you might like to do next year? Now, again, I'm just kind of talking off the top of my head, but I have done variations of that and seen quite a bit of quite a bit of movement in the times when I've needed to raise a little extra support. So anyway, it's just another little way. Just keep in mind, friends that are listening to the podcast, people do make financial decisions towards the end of the year that really can affect their following year's giving. And so having a plan, like Mark said earlier in this episode, is really key. You probably can't do everything Mark and I have just talked about. In fact, we've hit a ton of information over the last 20 minutes or so, but hopefully this is kind of getting you on the right track and maybe dislodging you a little bit if you were stuck. And hopefully you're realizing, hey, I need to say thank you. I need to have a plan that I start working. So, Mark, we're not totally done with the podcast, but we've definitely been going long enough. I think we can move towards the end. And so, as is my habit, I'd like to kind of move you towards final thoughts and say, what else should people be keeping in mind and thinking about as this podcast comes to a close and they have work to do?
Make a plan, work your plan. It's not too late. Because some people are still making that decision. They have not made the decision yet, and give it your best shot. Give it your best shot, and do all you can. So that's my final words.
Yep. Yeah, I would totally agree with everything you said. One word of warning for people: this is work. You might need to dial back a couple of other things in order to have the time to do this well. So keep in mind if you need to do a little organization and time management prior to jumping into this. But there is a finite amount of time, and at least in the U.S., the end of the calendar year can be very strategic. So, well, Mark, thanks again for joining us on the podcast. I think your words are wise as always, and I'll have to just wrap us up for now. And hey, would you be willing to join us again someday in the future, sir?
I would love to. I'd be honored.
All right, great. God bless. Thanks for joining us for this episode. We would love to hear your ideas for future content. Please visit supportraisingsolutions.org/feedback to share your thoughts and questions. Also, wherever you download your podcast from, be sure to subscribe for future episodes and come back each week to gain more insight into the process of building and maintaining your personal support team.